Alright guys, welcome back to another one. In today's video I want to talk a little bit about physical video games, as a couple of weeks ago, my country, New Zealand, received some pretty depressing news that is definitely evidence of times changing. Though we've known about this for quite some time, how physical video games are on the down and digital purchases of video games are on the absolute up, and it's been that way for the past decade. What I'm talking about here is EB Games, the main and only dedicated video game retail store across New Zealand, announced that it will be shutting down all of its 30 plus stores across the entire country by the 31st of January. For those that don't know, EB Games is basically GameStop in New Zealand, Australia, and I believe also Canada as well. Now, while it's definitely been apparent that less people have been buying physical video game media over the past decade, I certainly wasn't expecting to see the news of the one and only dedicated video game retailer here in New Zealand completely shutting down this soon on. I knew it would come eventually, but to see that news, to wake up to that news, was honestly some pretty crazy stuff. Now, it doesn't hit me super hard because it's not like it's the shop that I get all of my physical video games from. I actually shop at a different place, JB Hi-Fi, or an online retailer known as Mighty Ape. The only time I'd really ever find myself in a place like GameStop or EB Games is for the pre-owned section. It was always an exciting aspect to arrive in a different city, to head up the local EB Games to see what kind of pre-owned titles they have. And generally the prices of a lot of their pre-owned stuff is actually pretty reasonable versus looking for pre-owned video games online, as most people are trying to scalp up the prices if they know what they're listing. Otherwise, because EB Games or GameStop is a dedicated video game retailer, it means the only thing they're selling is video games and stuff related to video games. They have to mark up their price to stay afloat. So generally, all of their new stuff is like $10 to $20 more expensive compared to anywhere else. Now, this isn't to say that New Zealand no longer has a physical place to go to buy video games. Like I mentioned, JB Hi-Fi, which is a general all-round electronics store, they'll still continue to sell video games. We've also got another location that's similar to that of like Walmart, known as The Warehouse, a general retail store. But this does mean that New Zealand is losing its only dedicated video game store, and it's been that way for the past 25 years. However, it does make sense that New Zealand would be the very first country to see something like this happening due to times changing, due to the culture consuming their media digitally versus physically. We saw this happen with music and movies. In a funny way, video games for quite some time now has been like the last bastion in the frontier of remaining physical to some degree. The process of switching over to a purely digital landscape has actually been relatively slow if you compare both movies and visual media like TV series or music. That changeover happened pretty damn quick. We all know that this would happen eventually. What was a shock was when the PS5 Pro ended up launching a couple of years ago without a disk drive, and that the only way to play physical video games on the premium version of the PlayStation 5 was to buy an optional disk drive. That's when it really hit me. Oh shit, like this is actually happening. Yeah, like we are going towards an all digital future. Now what's crazy is with EB Games closing down, it meant that all of the stores throughout the country had to get rid of their inventory, and the quickest and best way to do that is to offer an absolutely insane sale, which meant that every store was offering 50% off absolutely everything. That's right, consoles, controllers, all of the games, all of the additional merchandise and Funko Pops that have been collecting dust for the past 8 years, literally everything in the store. So you can imagine the nerds of the Shire wasted no time, and there were hordes and hordes of people rushing to literally every EB game location around New Zealand, with stores being raided and basically emptied within the first 3 days of announcing this sale. I popped into 2 locations here in the city that I'm located in, and I was way too late. I turned up like 4 days after this news had come out. The only thing I managed to get was Eden's Zero for like $38 brand new or something. But otherwise, yeah, the stores, like at this point now, because we're now like 3 weeks on from the news coming out, all of the stores across the country are empty, gone, everything done and dusted. Even looking at America as well, there's been quite a number of different GameStop locations that have been closing down over the past few years due to poor sales. Now, something like this happening over in both Australia and the United States is going to happen a lot slower than it has happened here in New Zealand, but just know that it is inevitable. Inevitable. With it happening here in New Zealand first, it is signs that locations across many other different countries will start to slowly close down. I would say in the next 2 to 4 years, we'll likely see all of the EB Games locations across Australia end up closing down. And I'd say it's very likely that towards the end of Generation 10, so the PlayStation 6 and the next Xbox, we'll likely see all of the GameStops throughout the United States also follow suit. It's a shame, man, because I love my plastic shells with my disc inside. And in this case, this one actually does come with a little manual. Look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. But the thing is, if you were born like before 2005, then the only way you consumed video game media was physically. You'd go down to the store, browse through the game section, pick up a game case, read the synopsis on the back, look at the little pictures, flick through the manual on the way home to learn and educate yourself on the game you're about to play, read little story blurbs about the characters. The whole process of engaging in video game content and getting new video game content was different. It was a true, real experience. One of the fondest ways of doing this, because kids don't have large pockets, right? Unless you're born into wealth, is that you would rent your video games, which is basically what like Game Pass or PlayStation Plus is now. But of course, back in the day, you go to a Blockbuster, or here in my country, it was known as United Video or Video Easy. I would go down to the video rental store every single Friday and pick out a few games to play for the next coming week. And I looked forward to that every single week. Of course, it's been a hot minute since video game rental stores have been around. That now seems like a true relic of the past. But kids now are growing up without that whole experience. Though I'm sure that if a younger person were to hear me talking about this, it would almost be like your grandparents reminiscing about how people used to consume music and the joys of going down to the vinyl store and flicking through the vinyl collections to try and find your favorite one. It's really no different. It's the same kind of old hat stuff. And to be fair, I totally understand the perspective of the younger generation not really knowing any better other than purchasing all of their stuff, whether it be video games or anything else digitally, or just people that flat out prefer that method due to its convenience. The fact that you can just get the thing you're trying to get at your fingertips right there in the moment within 5 minutes. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Imagine telling someone you could do that during the N64 PlayStation 1 era. The thing is though, even the meaning behind physical video game media has been kind of disintegrating in recent times, especially when we look at something like the Nintendo Switch 2. The bulk of physical game releases for Switch 2 right now is simply just game keycards. You still get a case with a cartridge inside, but the cartridge is just simply acting as a physical license key that you'll put into your Switch system that then allows you to download that game from the server. But this isn't just exclusive to Nintendo. This has also been a thing for both Xbox and PlayStation for quite some time as well. Putting your disc into your console only to find out that there is zero game data on the disc, practically working the same way as a game keycard. It's simply just a license to tell your console, hey, you can now download the full game now. So even then, not all physical video game media is actually truly physical. A lot of it nowadays still requires internet connection to some degree. I truly think that Generation 10, PlayStation 6, is going to be the very final last console that will have physical video games. Looking at the generation that then comes after that, I think it's going to be completely digital from there on out. I'd say that similar to the PlayStation 5 Pro, the PlayStation 6 will have an optional disk drive, meaning that it will be an additional cost on top of the console price. And this does make sense. If 80% of consumers are purchasing their video games digitally, then why should they have to pay the extra when purchasing their console due to the addition of a disk drive? I totally understand that. But being someone that grew up in the late 90s, 1997 to be exact, growing up around Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, GameCube, or OG Xbox, where all video game media is completely physical, it is a really bizarre thing to see that being phased out. I think we'll still have things like collector's editions that'll come with a cool box and a statue or a figure inside with an art book and some other knickknacks, maybe a steelbook as well, but the actual physical video game, like discs, I think that in time will become a fossil of the past. So what this does for me is it kind of fuels this slight sickness I have where I'm trying my absolute darndest to collect as many physical cases with discs inside as humanly possible. Specifically just PlayStation 5 at this point, but I know that this is going to be one of the last generations of physical video game media, so I need as much as I can possibly get. So definitely some depressing news, especially for people currently living in New Zealand. If you're a gamer in this country like myself, you probably grew up going down to EB Games and looking at the video games and all of the nerdy stuff in there, growing up, or even, pushing 30, or maybe you are 30 and you're still going to EV Games. Yeah, it's a sad thing to see, man. Where else will I go now if I want to receive 2/5 of fuck all for a Nintendo DS trade-in? I'd love to know though, are you still buying physical video games, or are you primarily digital? Let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's video. Be sure to slippity slap that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Big shout out to my wonderful patrons and YouTube members. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and we'll talk again real soon.